Good morning, friends. Here we are this morning for the sixth day of our 21-day program online on human rights.
Yes, apante fan ko.
Today is a day where we will be dealing with issues related to those who are excluded. Yesterday we finished with Professor Deepak Nathan, who spoke to us about exclusion. Today we are dealing with the Dalits, the tribals, the manual scavengers, and the denotified tribes, all of whom fall under one category of those excluded in this country's democracy. A very powerful day, packed once again with speakers who are activists, and I'm happy to welcome into your midst Mr. Dr. V.A. Ramesh Nathan, who is the General Secretary of the National Dalit Movement for Justice. He will, as he proceeds, explain what the movement does. He is a national convener of a large coalition of over 500 organizations to which People's Watch also humbly belongs to, which worked for the amendment to the Scheduled Castes, Scheduled Tribes Prevention of Atrocities Act of 1989, which we got amended in 2015. He's a member of the Asia Dalits Rights Forum, one who initiated, along with others, the Asian Parliamentarians Forum for Dalit Concerns. He's the director of SASI, an NGO which functions in Tamil Nadu for many years together from the city of Tindivanam. He's a member of the working group on human rights and the UN that was introduced to you, initiated by Mr. Milun Kothari, and he is a member of the International Dalit Solidarity Network based in Copenhagen, which I incidentally have the honor of chairing at the moment. He has attended a number of UN sessions, a number of training programs, the Asian level, at the international level. But what is important is that he deals with issues of caste violence day in and day out with his team, both within Tamil Nadu and throughout the country because of NDMJ on a day-to-day basis. Over to you, Ramesh, for the next 25 to 30 minutes.
Thank you very much. My dear friends, Beamrates, Jai Beam, good morning to everyone. At the outset, I would like to congratulate, appreciate People's Watch for having organized online course on human rights. So people are at home these days because of the lockdown period, but making use of this time through technology, providing very important knowledge and skill on the human rights. Very particularly Henry Tiffin for taking this initiative and his team members. Friends, the title, the topic given to me is Dalit rights are human rights. When we say Dalit rights are human rights, then obviously we need to ask question, why do we need to specifically focus on the Dalit human rights? When the human rights are universally applicable to all the sections of the people, which means there is a gap in the international human rights discourse, or there may be inappropriate place where we can accommodate the Dalit human rights in available international human rights mechanism. So I like to present the context in which the Dalit human rights has been promoted both nationally and internationally, and also the main or the very major milestones of what we have achieved the last 2 decades, and where are we now. And finally, we need to also see the way forward in completing or achieving the main purpose or the initiative that we have taken to promote Dalit human rights. Friends, nowadays we all used to hear some of the terms very often used during this very critical period, the current situation of coronavirus spreading globally, including India. Very often we used to hear the term social distancing. And the WHO director recently alternately used the term called physical distancing. Social distancing and physical distancing. What it means to Dalit communities doesn't make any sense for me also from the point of Dalit community. Either it's a social distancing or whether it is a physical distancing. The physical distancing may give different connotation to different countries. But when it comes to India or South Asia, and in the context of Dalit situation, both the terms doesn't make much difference. Because the social distancing, social exclusion, social segregation, physical distancing, physical segregation, it's already existing in the country in South Asia for several generations. The caste, which is being sanctioned by Hindu fascist religion and practiced in India and South Asia, continue to practice untouchability practices. And the caste system originally, it is based on the feudal slavery system, continue to existed in the country, even some part of country today it is also prevails. So the very important aspect of the caste system, which divides the people basis on the birth, and especially the very, very important aspect of the caste system, treating Dalits as untouchable, unseenable, unapproachable. So the same elements we can see whether it is a social distancing or physical distancing. And very shocking thing is that by using these opportunities, the Sangh Parivar group misinterpreting the social distancing and physical distancing as if that they have been saying, or as if they have been teaching us from the Manu Dharma, that we have been saying this, you are not listened to us. We should not touch, we should not allow handshaking, we should not allow people inside, we should keep distance. I think all sort of things are now trying to justify in the name of the caste or in the name of Manu Dharma, again today in the coronavirus situation also. The scientists are saying the coronavirus do not have a DNA, but whereas the caste system is infiltrated in the DNA of all the people in India and South Asia. So consciously or unconsciously, people practice the caste system, untouchability practices. It is deeply rooted in their unconscious, in their culture, in their practices. So which means the caste is also a pride and privilege and power for the dominant caste people. People can starve without food, but they cannot live with caste identity because of this use of pride, privilege, and power. So in this context, we need to see how the Dalit communities for several generations being excluded from the mainstream society, and their education is denied. They have been forced to do all the menial jobs, and they have been segregated from the main villages, and they are supposed to do their birth duties, removal of dead body, dead animals, manual scavenging, and they have been prohibited to enter into the temples. No intercaste marriage is sanctioned, and we could see that in our study almost 154 forms of untouchability still it is being practiced. Even though the Indian Constitution Article 17, the untouchability practice is prohibited, and practice of any forms of untouchability is a punishable offense. But despite the untouchability practices illegally practiced by all the citizens of the country. So in this context, I would like to narrate the very important milestone, how the entire promotion of human rights come into the picture, or collectively taken effort. Two important milestone I can see. One is the late 80s and early till mid 90s. There is a very significant period. Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, who has been fighting against the caste system and fighting for the equality, dignity of the Dalit communities. But even though he is known as an architect of the Indian Constitution, but he is also treated as untouchable in the country, even today. People are not recognizing him as a leader because of his birth. But despite all this, 1989 and 91, the government of India declared 1 year celebration of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar birth centenary. I think this is a very significant milestone. As part of the celebration, there were several conventions took place, conference took place. In many parts, the meetings were taken place. The movement started revisioning the ideology of the Babasaheb Ambedkar. And as part of this, many Dalit movements were emerged in different parts of the country. The Dalit youth started mobilizing, celebrating Ambedkar birth centenary, and they started establishing Ambedkar statue in all over the villages, which is really thrown up a lot of political issue. This is not being tolerated by the dominant caste people. They started demolishing the Ambedkar statues. Around this, the Dalit movements also politicalized this issue for building the movement to abolish the caste system. This has given a paradigm shift among the mainstream political parties, or including the civil societies. People who have been believing or following the Marxian ideology started looking at Ambedkar ideology, abolition of the caste system. They realized that in India or elsewhere in South Asia, without abolition of the caste system, the equality for the working class or empowerment of the working class is not possible. This kind of shift has been taken place in the mainstream societies. There are also lessons learned from the Black liberation movement. as the Black Liberation Movement built their own struggles, their own movement, promoting the black is beautiful, black art, black music, black feminism, black literature. Similarly, in India, in the same period, the Dalit politics has been promoted, strengthened after Baba Sahib Ambedkar. Dalit literature has been promoted. Initially, there was a lot of difficulties, debates against Dalit literature. It was not recognized. Ramayana, Mahabharata, or these kind of mix of stories have been recognized as part of the literature. But the Dalit writers struggled, established the Dalit literature by writing the real stories, the real struggles of the people, of the Dalit communities who have been fighting for their dignity and rights. And similarly, Dalit art forms have been promoted, which was considered as inferior other than the classic art and classic music. Dalit music has been promoted. Today, especially in Tamil Nadu where I am sitting, there is no film, Tamil film, without Dalit music or Dalit art. It has been reached that to the level in the mainstream film industries also. Dalit feminism has been promoted. The concept of the Dalit feminism, the empowerment of Dalit women, or the issue of Dalit women is something different from the women of the other women of the mainstream society. So the Dalit feminism also being promoted. In the same period, 1989, the Scheduled Caste, Scheduled Tribe Prevention of Atrocities Act is being passed in the parliament, which is a very, very powerful act and very significant act which protects the rights of the Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribe. Friends, when I say all these aspects, at the same time, in the same period, the Hindu fundamentalistic party, particularly the BJP party, also gained 85 seats in the parliament. First time, it's a huge number for BJP party. Since then, the BJP party also politically powerful. The Hindu fundamentalist organizations are also becoming very, very powerful. You can see the contradiction. One side, the Dalit movement, which is very strongly coming out to abolish the caste system. The other side, the Hindu fundamentalist organization, politically powerful and trying to re-establish the caste system or uphold the Manuvadi Dharma in the country. The contradiction became very, very strong. And also you can see in 1992, through the 73rd and 74th amendments in the local government, first time the Scheduled Caste, Scheduled Tribe, they got a reservation in proportionate to their population. And women in general, 33%. We thought that this grassroots democracy going to bring a drastic change, a big transformation at the grassroots level because of recognition of the constitution of the local government. The amendment has recognized the local government as a third stratum of the government. But finally we found as at the ground level, it has thrown up a lot of issues. In many places, Dalits elected representatives were killed. In many parts, the election could not be conducted. And even then, they are elected, they are not allowed to sit in the chair. They didn't allow to pass the resolution. They did not allow to execute the resolution passed in the local government. This has thrown up a lot of issues. So which means we have to see one side. I started saying that the caste-based feudal slavery system existed. till this period. But since from this late 80s and 90s, this had a big shift. People started asserting, because of this building of movement, emergence of the various powerful youth associations, Dalit women's movement. So as part of this assertion, we could see the backlash against the Dalit communities. As long as the society or the Dalit community accepted the caste system, accepted the untouchability and slavery, there was not much atrocities against the Dalit community. But it has happened here and there. But since this period, the country witnessed the heinous crimes, massacre killings in many parts of the country. Especially I can quote few major incidents which are well known nationally and internationally. And almost all these cases, most of the cases, the accused are convicted at the sessions court. When it gone to the appeal in the High Court, many of these cases are acquitted in the High Court. So the High Court is a kind of door for the accused to get the acquittal. So then we know how the higher judiciary also biased on the basis of caste. I can quote few important cases. Number one, 1991 in Andhra Pradesh, the place called Sundur. 8 people were cut into pieces and put into Koni bag and thrown in the drainage because there was a small quarrel in the cinema theatre, which has resulted in killing of so many Dalits in Sundur in 1991. In 1994 in Tamil Nadu, where Dalit movements were protesting, demanding their own land, which was given during the British period, which is called depressed class land or Panchami land. When they were having peaceful protest on the road, 2 the Dalit activists have been shot dead by the police. Their demand is their own land to be redistributed, which is being taken away by the dominant caste people. That is their rightful demand. You can see in 1995, a girl studying in the 5th standard, Dhanam, she was punished by the teacher. Her eyesight was lost. But luckily, today she has become a teacher. So that is the kind of assertion that we are seeing. 1995 to 1997, in the state of Bihar, a private army called Ranveer Sena, promoted by the landlords, which was supported by many of the political parties, fundamentalist organizations, have killed thousands of people, more than 3,000 people, starting from 1994 to 1997. Especially 1997, 1st December, 58 people were shot dead by this private army called Ranveer Sena. Recently, an investigative media did a sting operation called Black Rain, and they went and documented the statement of those founders and the commentators of the Ranveer Sena. They proudly, with a caste pride, they confessed how they found who promoted those Ranveer Sena army, who has supplied weapons from the army, and who has sponsored the money. All those people are today, few members are lost their life, but today some of them, they are central ministers in the BJP party ruling. So those people who have been convicted in the sessions court All those people have been acquitted in the Patna High Court in 2013, saying, giving the benefit of doubt to the side of the accused. This is the issue. The President of India at that time, he said it's a national shame, well-known case. Today, even the people are living with the fear in Lakshmipur Pate, where these 58 people were shot dead. A boy that time was 5 years old. Today he became adult and still he is carrying bullet in his neck, not able to remove it. The victim is asking me today, okay, the people who have been acquitted, they are not committed any guilty against us. But tell me, tell me the people who have killed us. The reality is that 58 people have been shot dead. But who is the people who have committed guilty against the Dalit communities in the country? Nobody is able to answer, including judicial. Today, that a private appeal has been filed in the Supreme Court. So, in Tamil Nadu, similarly, 1997, the elected Panchayat president, along with his 6 members, heads were chopped off in the public bus because the dominant caste not able to tolerate the Dalits becoming president of the village. They may be accept to become a president of India, but at the village level, they are not able to accept a Dalits becoming the Panchayat president. So I can go on quote many cases. The major massacre took place in the country. But look at the current phenomenon. These atrocities keep increasing every year. In the last 5-6 years, 30%, 40%, 44%, every year it is increasing. I would like to refer here the National Crime Record Bureau data published recently for 2018. In the year 2018, 42,539 crimes or offences are committed against scheduled caste. 6,525 offences are committed against scheduled tribes. This is 40% increase when we compare to 2019. And look at the particular offense, the rape, the crime committed against Dalit and Adivasi communities in the country. 2,936 rape were committed, offences are committed against scheduled caste, 1,008 against scheduled tribe women. Almost in an average, 9 Dalit women are raped in the country. 3 tribal women are raped in the country. Recently, Prime Minister is proudly claiming that India is the one who is teaching yoga, gifting yoga technique to the world. Prime Minister should know before teaching the world that he must be able to see that our own house is in order. The people are treated equally. People, the guaranteed rights are being implemented properly before teaching something to other world. Is this the country feels proud? Not only women are raped. Very recently, we could have seen in newspaper every day, the minor girls have been raped. Minor Dalit girls have been raped, especially by the Hindu fundamentalists. The caste system is also, what I said already, people becoming mad, mentally ill. I think Prime Minister should be able to treat our own people from the caste virus before we treating the coronavirus elsewhere. So in this context, the Dalit leaders from different parts come together in the year 1997 and especially the broken people, the research paper published by Human Rights Watch, researcher by the Sumita Narula. I think that has also really helped the Dalit leaders come together and deliberated the situation, the violation which took place during these 90s. And as a result, it was decided and the national campaign was launched in the year 1998 on 10th December, on the day of International Human Rights Day, called National Campaign on Dalit Human Rights. This has given a new slogan, that is, Dalit rights are human rights. A people, a culture, a history. This has given a boost to Dalit movement, Dalit activists. Till then, we have not really heard that the Dalit rights are human rights. It was not recognized. And the human rights organization in the country, which represented to UN bodies, also did not raise the issue of caste, the rights of Dalits in the international forums, accepting our great leader Ruth Manorama, Fatima, and Henry Tiffin. Other than this, I have not seen in the past who really raised our issues in the international forums. But this period, when the Dalit leaders have launched the campaign promoting this slogan, Dalit rights are human rights, it is really given a different strength and power to Dalit movement. This also has given a shift among the civil society organization, Dalit organization, looking at the Dalit issue from the international human rights framework. That has given a kind of power to approach our issue, Dalit issue, as a human rights issue. And especially the campaign has promoted to make the state accountable for all the crimes are committed against Dalits, and see that the special legislations are implemented properly to protect the rights of Dalit communities. And it is also promoted to internationalize the Dalit issues, take the issues to United Forums, EU forums, to address the caste-based discrimination. It is also taken initiatives to promote International Dalit Solidarity Network in different parts, to mobilize the support from the international communities. The International Dalit Solidarity Network is established in Copenhagen, what Henry Tiffin said in the beginning in his note, and today is the chairperson of the International Dalit Solidarity Network. And within the country, we also promoted the campaign. We have taken the campaign to the grassroots level. And through this, different initiatives have been taken to implement the available existing special legislation, particularly the SC/ST PO Act. In 2009, we also formed a national level coalition consisting of 500 Dalit and Adivasi organizations, taken several efforts, drafting the amendments, and finally we were able to achieve or strengthen the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe prevention of atrocities by incorporating newer forms of offences, defining certain important terms, intention, willful negligence by the duty bearers. Those terms have been defined in the Amendment Act. Very particularly time period for conducting trials, establishment of exclusive special court, exclusive public prosecutors, and very importantly, the new chapter has been incorporated, is called the rights of the victim and witnesses.
No, it's not. I don't.
That's a very important component in the SC/ST PO Act, Amendment Act. the international advocacy have been continued by various Dalit movements, Dalit organizations, and as a result, there has been several significant progress has been made. In 2001, in Durban, the World Conference Against the Racism took place. Since then, we have been creating visibilities for the Dalit issues in the international fora. And during this World Conference, also, that time, also BJP party was leading, ruling the country. They sent a large number of contingent IAS, IPS officers from the scheduled caste people to demonstrate, saying that there is no untouchability practices or there is no violence against Dalit communities. We have got a very good constitution. We have got affirmative policies, reservation in the constitution for scheduled caste and scheduled tribe, in the education, employment, and political participation.
Ramesh.
That's how they blocked the very important resolutions in the WCR. So, friends, very important thing that I would like to say now, as the result of our advocacy, the UN Human Rights Council have constituted 2-member special rapporteur to study and come out with recommendations to address the caste-based discrimination, the UN term called work and descent-based discrimination. They have submitted a report, also the draft principles and guidelines to eliminate all forms of discrimination based on work and descent. Still, it has to be ratified by the UN Human Rights Council. And today, we are just little moving from looking at our situation, the caste situation, not only India, the caste may be originated in India, but in elsewhere, in South Asia, the same type of caste system and untouchabilities and atrocities are prevails in Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Malaysia, and different continent. So there were many bodies were promoted: Asia Dalit Rights Forum, Asia Parliamentarian Forum for Dalit Concern, and last year there was also Global Congress on elimination of discrimination based on work and descent took place. Global Parliamentarian Forum took place, and through this forum we have to move forward to the United Nations to recognize and come out with a declaration and convention to eliminate all forms of discrimination based on the caste and work and descent based. I think with this objective we have to move forward. Finally, I would like to conclude the movement, the Dalit human rights movement began with the slogan, Dalit rights are human rights. But today we are able to claim all the human rights are Dalit rights. All the human rights, Dalit rights. I think with this spirit, with the solidarity of all the human rights organizations, not only Dalit organization, with the support of all human rights organizations which are working for the women, children, and Adivasis, and many sectors. So we all have to come together. We have to move towards achieving a UN declaration and convention to address the caste-based discrimination, so that the Dalit communities can regain their human dignity and rights. Thank you very much. Jai Bhim.
Thank you, Ramesh. Thank you very much. I was wondering how you would manage all this. You have done it. That itself is an achievement of tracing the origins of caste, of tracing the atrocities in the country, and the sign of hope of where the transition took place of Dalit rights being considered as human rights and at the highest level in the United Nations. Thank you very much. Now, I would, without saying anything, at this stage, I would request, I think it is Rajwell, who's doing the questions?
I'm doing it.
Matthew?
Yeah. Thank you, Ramesh ji.
Thank you.
Yeah, very briefly because we are running out of time. Some participants asked about the provisions of the SC/ST POA Amendment Act. So if you can highlight some provisions briefly and how to implement, they are asking section 4.3 and 4.2. The second question here, I'll only put two questions to you. Why hasn't the UN announced caste discrimination as a discrimination? Like you mentioned about in work descent, etc. But what are the reservations with regard to use the terminology caste discrimination? Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. I briefly respond to the first question because if I go through the very important provisions of the SC/ST Act, that will take time. So what I will do is I will send the material in very short form. It will be very useful. But we have to understand the act is really powerful. The objective act is to promote social justice and prevent the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe from the atrocities. So the very important point is almost 45 forms or offences are listed out in the section 3, which are punishable offence under this act. So under this act, very special aspect is there is no anticipated bail is granted, and immediate arrest, and also the affected people, the victims, have a right to claim relief, compensation, rehabilitation measures. I think this is something different. One side, it is a punishable offense. The other side, affected people are also getting a relief measures, rehabilitation measures through this act. And under this act, in all the districts, exclusive special court should be established to conduct trial and speedy justice should be delivered, and exclusive public prosecutors should be appointed. And very special thing is that a exclusive special public prosecutor can be also appointed on the desire or the choice of the victims. That's a very, very special aspect. And the rights of the victim and witnesses, that's something very unique, that the victims have a right to get all the documents, FIR, charge sheet, informations. Also, they have a right to oppose any kind of bill. They have a right to be heard before granting the bail, either in the Sessions Court or in the High Court. I think these are the very special thing that I can send you more information, especially Section 4, the term called willful negligence of the duty bearer are punishable under this act. But it was very difficult to prove in front of a law the willful negligence. Negligence itself in as offense. Then how do we prove the willful negligence? But in the newly amended act, we have defined 10 points. What is willful negligence? So even then, it is something very difficult, because apart from all this, even though we have a concrete evidences, then finally it has to go through administrative inquiry and procedures. Very recently, 28th April, Delhi High Court has passed one judgment in one of the case, which was filed by the Praveen Kumar, who is the champion of horse riding game, and is supporter Kapil Modi. They have filed a case in the High Court of Delhi against SHO, the police officer who refused to file FIR. There was ample evidence which is being produced. This man Kapil Modi is not a Dalit person, but he is really committed. He went through the act. He is convinced. He uncompromisingly fought in the High Court. He got a direction on 28th April. The High Court has directed the officials to prosecute against the SHO. This is something, one of the landmark judgment. So which means if you want to make out section 4, we need to document proper evidences and produce before court of law to the magistrate. So there is a lot of possibility to prosecute against the officials who are neglecting their duties. And second question with regard to reservation in using the caste discrimination. This issue we have been also debating among ourselves. When we say that term work and descent-based discrimination, it doesn't really give the feeling or doesn't give the kind of untouchability or the heinous crimes are committed. It looks like very soft word, descent-based discrimination. So there is a lot of debate trying to also come to terms what kind of appropriate alternate term can be used or introduced by the Dalit movement. That discussion is going on. But also very importantly, we need to also take into account when we advocate with the United Nations, it is not only confining to India or in South Asia, the caste-based discrimination, also the similar forms of discrimination faced by some of the communities in Japan, Gurako communities, and in some of the African countries and Latin America countries. In many continents, similar forms of discriminations also practiced. So we are trying to bring all these excluded communities, discriminated communities together. So in that context, the work and descent-based discrimination at present, it is applicable to all the communities which are discriminated. But still, we are also very conscious, and every time we are including the caste, work and descent-based discrimination, including the caste. I think with this conscious, we are moving forward.